Hello, Paulo Leite here, record collector. Today I am in Washington, D.C., and I am going to be visiting Joint Custody. Let's go inside. It has been snowing hard these past few days, but today is a bit warmer. We go down here, and here we are. As you can see, it's all about vinyl. The shop has a great atmosphere. Maybe it's all this vinyl that makes it warm and cozy. It's also very quiet, perfect for listening to some of these records. The shop has this main room with lots of records. Then there is this corridor that will take us to the back room with more vinyl. We'll get there in a minute. Let's start with their soul and funk collection. And we're out of the gate with Love's Happening from 1969 by the 5 Stair Steps and Cubby. This is their third album. The 5 Stair Steps was a Chicago-based band whose members were 4 brothers and their sister. At that time in American music, there were many vocal bands made from brothers and sisters. Of course, the Jackson 5 ended up being the most famous of them all, but the 5 Stair Steps were also incredibly successful back then. Roy Ayers' You Send Me from 1978. People may not realize, but Roy Ayers has an enormous discography, which is totally deserved since he is a brilliant musician. Here's In the Dark from 1984. And he is still with us. Long live Roy Ayers. Ghetto of the Mind from 1972 by Bama, the Village Poet. I think his name was George McCord, and I think this was his only album. This is beautiful poetry with some gorgeous background music. Some people may not like his harsh voice, but I do, and some of these poems are really profound. Live April Nights by BLT, that's Bottom Line Transaction from 1980. They were a group of musicians that performed in nightclubs in Oklahoma City during the 70s. I think they were very good, and this album is totally worth it. But for some reason, they didn't record much. Bohannon from 1975. I absolutely love him. He was an arranger of some of the best artists at Motown. Then he went his own way and released a number of great records. He had a very distinct sound. Melting Pot by Booker T and the MGs from 1971. This was the in-house band at Stax. They were amazing, and this is their last album with the band's original lineup. I love this one, Brass Construction 5 from 1979. Some of the best disco came right at the end of the disco era. And this album has it. Funk and disco blended perfectly here. Terry Collier, Fire and Ice from 1978. Terry Collier was an amazing artist. And his next album, Turn You to Love from 1979. 2 albums from an artist that needs to be praised and rediscovered. Oh my god, the versatile Impressions from 1969 by The Impressions. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a great album. Curtis Mayfield's vocals are gorgeous, and the album contains nothing but great songs. Curtis left the group in 1970, but they continued and had a great career. Here's Preacher Man from 1973, another great album. And speaking of Curtis, I love this one with Linda Clifford. I'm a big Van McCoy fan. This one is still sealed. For peanuts. Wow, the Nightlighters from 1970. I love them. They were one of the funkiest bands to ever come out from Detroit, created by former Motown producers Vernon Bullock and Harvey Fuqua. This is their first album. They existed between 1970 and 1973 with different lineups and a different name, The New Birth. From 1974 onwards, they continued just as The New Birth. Here's Birthday from 1972. This album contains a gorgeous, very minimalistic version of Stop, Look and Listen to Your Heart, previously recorded by The Stylistics. Here's Blind Baby from 1975. Although they never lost their focus on a strong brass section, their sound here is more elegant and well finished. And speaking of elegance, Universal Love from 1975 by MFSB. They were simply the best orchestra in the business during the 70s. From Sigma Sound Studios, of course. If you are enjoying this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. There's always great new content coming. It's great to find all of these awesome records here. Joint Custody has indeed one great collection. Joint Custody also has a generous number of 12-inch singles, where I found this beauty, a promotional copy with 3 versions of Spanish Hustle from 1975 by the Fatback Band. This was a copy for broadcasting with the short version, the album version, and a longer version. Starting in 1972, the Fatback Band is pretty much forgotten these days, but they had quite a successful career with over 20 albums. Here's a band that needs to be rediscovered. This 12-inch from 1985 by the Majestics has instrumental versions on both sides, which is quite nice. There is also a small neo-soul section. And don't forget to check under the displays for more great albums. Here's Marvin Gaye's Trouble Man from 1972 with its folding cover. Right after the Doors, we can see the new arrivals with plenty of great albums. Here's a great George Benson album. Bad Benson from 1974 contains a beautiful version of Take 5, immortalized by the Dave Brubeck Quartet. Beautiful Alice Coltrane album, whose title I cannot pronounce, from 1977. Now, if you look around the shop, there is plenty of rare albums that naturally cost a little more. My choice goes to Patrice Rushen. Prelusion from 1974 is her first album. She is a multi-instrumentalist, a singer, composer, and record producer. She is a powerhouse artist. I'm a huge fan. Beautiful music there. This long corridor, filled with more vinyl, will take us to the back room. Here we'll find the rock section. Marriage on the Rocks Rock Bottom from 1970 by the M-Boy Dukes. This is their 4th album, to me one of their best. Wow! In Hearing of Atomic Rooster from 1971 by the Atomic Rooster. I heard this album for the first time when I was a teenager. It left a big impression on me. Great songs. Second Wind from 1972 by Brian Auger's Oblivion Express. I have been a fan for years, although I confess I arrived late. I only started listening to them in the late 90s. I've been a fan ever since. And you know something? Even today, sometimes, I still can't believe David Bowie is dead. Am I the only one? The Second Brooklyn Bridge from 1969 by The Brooklyn Bridge. I think people did not like it much when it was first released. Maybe it was too pretty, too well produced, too well arranged. At the time when most bands were playing anger, dissonance, and experimentation. I have always liked it precisely because of its beauty. This proves that if you really know music, the best records are not necessarily the most expensive ones. And now for something completely different. In for the Kill from 1974 by Budgie. This album contains Crash Course in Brain Surgery, a song that later would be covered by Metallica in 1987. This one needs to be rediscovered. Elijah from 1972. Here is a band that's unjustly forgotten. They only released 2 albums. This is the first and it's very good. Come On React from 1969 by the Fireballs. This was their last album. They achieved some success in the late 50s. They were extraordinary musicians, often playing on other artists' albums. Flavors from 1974 by the Guess Who. There was a quadraphonic version of this album at some point. People don't normally consider this to be one of their best, but I like it very much. KDKB is a radio station in Phoenix, Arizona. They used to release rock compilations with their most played songs. This was very common in the 70s and 80s. Radio stations everywhere would periodically release their own hit parade albums. For kids like me, these albums were a fundamental part of their music education since they gave them a little bit of everything. Plus, no one had the money to buy all of those artists' studio albums. You know, growing up in Brazil, we never had those radio station compilations that were pretty much a regional thing in the US. However, a Canadian label, KTEL, released tons of compilation albums in Brazil. Albums similar to this one, Music Machine from 1977. I used to have a love-hate relationship with these albums. On one side, I loved the fact that I could get 4 or 5 great songs from different artists on the same album. But on the other side, I hated the fact that they contained mostly single versions that were many times much shorter than the album versions. This A Journey to Time Volume 5 compilation is a limited edition. I think only 500 were ever released. They were all hand-numbered. I'm a huge Moody's fan. Oh my god, The Thoughts of Emerlist Devjack from 1968 by The Nice. This is their first album. This is one of the best rock albums ever. It's one that defies classification. Prog rock, psychedelic, art rock, yes, it's all that and much more. They only released 3 studio albums until Keith Emerson left the group in order to form Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This entire display contains rock albums, and the collection is excellent. And as always, you should never skip the albums under the display, because there is always good stuff hidden there. Like this one, Cissy Houston from 1977, Whitney's Mother. Produced by Michael Zager, this album contains some beautiful songs. Cissy's voice shines through all of them. And sealed for $5. Go there right now and get this album. You'll thank me later. And speaking of Cissy Houston, let's talk about metal. The metal collection here at Joint Custody is quite good, with some very unusual finds. Power and the Glory from 1983 by 100% Proof. I think they only released 2 albums. Piles of Festering Decomposition from 2020 by 200 Stab Wounds. Well, what can I say? Is that great drumming or what? Pretty soon, death metal bands will run out of concepts to name their albums. Can't get more death than this. Kaizoku Ben from 1985 by Accept, a German metal band I like very much. White Hot from 1978 by Angel. I love this album, but somehow this cover always makes me laugh, just a little bit. Pacto con el Diablo from 1984 by Ángeles del Infierno. This was a very successful Spanish metal band. Wow, Rock Lochner, I think from 1998. I believe they only had 2 albums, both self-released. They were pretty good and now pretty hard to find. And here's a nice turntable if you want to listen to any of this. There is so much great vinyl here at Joint Custody that I will have to break this video in 2 parts. So this is the end of part 1. Part 2 is coming right next. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. More great content coming soon. Thank you.